And we're back with Record Live, and it's a bit different this week. We don't have Zanita. Zanita is up at the South Queensland Big Camp, so she's having some fun up there, hopefully staying dry. I hear from Zanita today that it is bucketing down,
No.
and here in Sydney, yeah, always when there's a camp, there's guaranteed to be rain. If they want to break droughts around the place, they should just schedule a camp, I think. But we're very blessed. We're very, very blessed to have Pastor Josh Stothers join us today. Hey, Josh, it's great to have you. I think you might have done a Record Live. Is this your first one or your second one?
Second one. I did do one.
You
a couple of years ago when I was in New Zealand. Yeah,
I think we did one about music, if I remember correctly. So that was fun. But today, we really appreciate your willingness to jump in and help out while Zanita's away. Jesse, who has also appeared on the program, it's his birthday today, so shout out to Jesse, who also works with us here. He's having some leave, lucky guy, while he celebrates his birthday week. So yeah, good for him. But yeah, thanks for joining us today. So Josh, while we get into today's topic, just give us a bit of you, a bit of Josh. Who is Josh, and what is it that you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, well, hi everyone. My name is Josh. As you've heard, I'm a pastor working for our church. So blessed and lucky to be doing what I'm doing. I just love my job and my role. It's just so much fun. I was a pastor for 5 years in New Zealand and recently moved back to Sydney. It still feels really recent because so much of that time has been in like COVID lockdown. So it still kind of feels new to be here. And and at the moment I am pastoring at Castle Hill Church and I'm a chaplain at Hills Adventist College. So yeah, it's such an awesome time. We're in our last week at the moment of school for the term and our year 12s are finishing. So it's getting emotional, all these things. But yeah, it's really, really and I am married. I'm married to somebody who works for the Record, which is exciting, Danelle. Yeah, she's got a really cool article that's just come out, I think, or just coming out. No, just come out. The one on partners. Really cool. Shout out to my own wife's article. Legend.
Yes.
Yeah. And,
why not?
Yeah, and and we have a daughter, and yeah, we are having lots of fun being here in Sydney. Yeah, nice one. What a great article! Look at that.
There's Danelle. Yes. Celebrating World Pathfinder Day, which I believe was just this past Sabbath. Many Pathfinder clubs and people around the world celebrated, so she had that article. In the same issue, Josh, is the article that we're going to talk about today. So it's got a beautiful, restful, peaceful cover, this record, and there's a great article on the Sabbath in there as well, if you'd like to check that out. But today we're going to talk a little bit about my editorial for the issue, which is called Working in the Unexpected. So if you open up your record, you'll see that right there in the front cover. And I thought,
I've got it up on my iPad.
Oh, he's got the digital version. Very good. So just a reminder to those watching, you can get it on PDF and all sorts of places nowadays, the record. So yeah, I thought we'd talk about the editorial because, people sometimes ask me, how do you write so many editorials? How do you come up with ideas and inspiration and all that? And yeah, some weeks it's a challenge. Some weeks it's just like, that's what's happening in my life and that's what needs to be said. But I think with this particular one, like many of them, sometimes it's hard to encapsulate what you want to say in 700 words. Some people, I know the feeling myself as well, are afraid of words. It's hard to fill out, a lot of words for some people, but sometimes it's also like you can tell one part or one element of the story, but there's so much left unsaid. And so that's why we do these record lives. Sometimes we get behind the story, I guess, a bit more in depth around this topic. So I entitled the article Working in the Unexpected. And I guess to start us off, the article's about prayer. I guess that's what I wanted to explore. I was thinking about prayer because I don't know about you, Josh, but I find that sometimes in my life are harder to pray than others. Have you experienced that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just doing a Bible study earlier today with somebody. We were talking about the parable of the sower, throwing out the seeds to all different kinds of soil. And I mentioned how, like, our heart, I feel like there are some seasons where, like, we can our heart can be a bit hard, and we're not as open to things that God's trying to teach us. But also one of the situations where one of the soils that the seed can go into is thorns, right? And I think, and that's all about, like, the worry. If have the message of God and it's the kingdom of God and it's trying to grow, but Jesus talks about how, like, the worries of life and all the stress and even like the lure of money, all of these distractions can grow up with it and choke it out. And I feel like sometimes I get I see myself in that season sometimes of just like, I know I should pray, I know I should like keep praying, pray longer. But I've just got so much in my mind. It's like those weeds or thorns are just like choking it out, or the things that are distracting me, and I'm just sitting there trying to pray, and in my head I'm like, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to call this person, I've got to, all these things can be so easily we can get off track. So yeah, I can totally see there are difficult seasons in prayer sometimes. Yeah,
I think, for me, it's often stress or worry is one thing that leads me to prayer. So when bad stuff happens in life, we tend to be more open to prayer. We tend to be more desperate, maybe, in our prayers.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, I was at first I was sort of in my mind working out this editorial. I was kind of rebelling against that idea, like maybe we shouldn't just pray when things are going badly. And so I spent a bit of time exploring, I guess, being prepared for life by praying regularly. I guess we see that in the story of Daniel, particularly when Daniel sort of prays every day. And even with the threat of the lions, the threat of death, he still sees that prayer as something, he should still do. And I guess I was reflecting on, hey, I'm trying to get into these stressful situations and pray my way out of them. What do you think is the value of sort of having a regular prayer life, I guess we call it, a regular prayer habit?
Yeah, it's massive. Like, to me, it's like the roots, again, coming back to that Bible study, because it's on my mind, that parable. Like, it can just be, it's the idea that, like, there's even that soil, like, the shallow soil, the seed that goes into the shallow soil, and it sprouts up, but then because it's got no roots, it just falls over as soon as there's a troubling season. And having that, like, I think a regular prayer habit or even a prayer discipline, that is that, like, root forming activity. It's bringing those roots that are going down into your life, and even letting, I guess, like, the message of the kingdom, the teachings of Jesus, his way of living, it's actually allowing yourself to be an apprentice of Jesus. His teaching is allowing, like, I guess, whole self to be, like, I guess, encompassed by his way of life, and his way of looking at the world. And if you're regularly tapping into that, it's more opportunity for those roots to go deeper, for those things to come to the surface that need to come to the surface, so that when those tough seasons come, instead of prayer being like the fire escape, it's more like the prayer is like, it's just already a part of it. It's already a part of you, and it's actually what's going to hold you in that season, hold you together. It's like those, what do they call those plants that grow on, like, sand dunes, and they hold all the sand together? I can't remember what they're called.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Banksia?
They're very mangroves, I think.
Yes. Mangroves. Yeah, and they, like, hold the whole thing together, which is amazing. It's like, it's sand. It's like loose, and yet somehow it's all held together by these roots that just get all tangled in it. And that's what I think about, like, that the prayer life is actually creating a foundation and a structure where you need it, really.
I really like that. I'm picturing like these shallow rooted trees that get blown over in hurricanes and stuff. When the storm comes along, and the storm is a bit of an image that we use a lot because Jesus, went through a storm or two, and then, there's Jonah, and there's other stories that we're on the sea, there's a storm, what's happening. And so we often bring, I guess, spiritual lessons out of that. But I'm just thinking of that tree as you were speaking, that tree that just, the first wind comes along and it gets blown over because its roots haven't, I guess, been deep enough, but they're not connected to the source in that sense. And I guess, that's one danger of not having a prayer life that's sort of deep and well rooted. But I guess the other sort of I guess side of the coin to explore is the unexpected, because we're talking about how God works in the unexpected circumstances. And I think I'm going to make a big statement, but I feel like we sometimes use our prayer life to control God.
Wow.
So do you want to speak to that a little bit? What comes to your mind when I say something like that? Like, we're using our prayer to control God. What do you think of the dangers and the, I guess, pitfalls of that for our own faith journey, but also, just our spiritual lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, it's coming to God with that. Like, prayer can become coming to God with like your like needs list. Like, all right, God, you've got to do things. I did AEST. Like, obviously, we can bring all of our needs to God, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But yeah, I guess there can be a danger of trying to manipulate God into doing those things. And I don't know how to word that, but even it's like, oh God, if you can do this for me, then I'll never binge eat again, or whatever it is. I don't know. Or I'll never get mad.
We make bargains,
Yeah. Thinking we could like, God. I don't know, almost like coerce God into like filling out these needs, especially when we get desperate and worried, in those unexpected times where like, I don't know about you, but I get a bit like frantic when I get worried, and you just start like speaking out all of these things. And I guess like it can be, it can be challenging to our picture of God, because he can become like just this, I don't know, like Santa or whatever, like
like Santa, or like, even the pagan deities. I'm reminded of like the old school way of thinking about the gods. I had to sacrifice something to get the rain to come, or I have to that sort of concept. Like, am I doing things to earn God's favor? Am I just praying to earn God's favor? Am I ticking it off my list, and it's falling into sort of rote prayers and just meaningless repetitions? I think the Bible talks about. Am I earning God's favor? That's the opposite of grace, I think. It's not. It's works religion, because we're trying to corral God. Or I think that's the danger of that sort of thing, is we're trying to actually earn God's favor. We're in control of our own situations.
Yeah, and God can seem distant. Like, he's up on, or like, he's up on Mount Olympus and I'm down here. To be close to him, I have to ascend. I have to get up to his level.
Right.
Yeah, because down here it's all chaos, and I'm stuck in the chaos. But yeah, to be with God, I have to ascend up to this and be good enough to ascend up that mountain. Can be a dangerous way of thinking. So I think I'm getting sidetracked off the idea of the unexpected.
No. I think that's right, because it can be dangerous. But what about? I mean, have you seen? My premise in the article was that God works in the unexpected, and I didn't have a lot of time or space to explore that, to really fill that out. But I feel like maybe he does. Have you seen God work in the unexpected ways, or in unexpected places? Do we see it in the Bible? Like, can you think of any examples that sort of can give me some evidence, some proof for my argument. What is God doing in unexpected places? And I guess the follow-on from that, we can explore that a little bit, but I guess the follow-on is, how do we become more comfortable being in unexpected places, as in not being in control? Because I think that's a real part of our relationship with God in some ways. But first we'll look at, unexpected places. How do we see God move? Do we see God move in those places and spaces?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think 100%, I shouldn't say 100%. He moves in the expected and unexpected, but yeah, I agree 100% that he moves in unexpected places. I remember at a church I used to pastor in New Zealand, there was a Sabbath school group there who would meet, and beginning of every Sabbath school lesson, the leader would go around the group and ask for, hey, what were God's divine appointments this week? And so the group would just share, what he called divine appointments. So these are unexpected moments when God had seemed to have an appointment made up for you and you didn't even realize. Like, to us, it's unexpected,
right?
But to him, he expected it. And I used to love some of the stories that would come up. It's just like people walking down the street and they're like, oh, I feel like I should turn left here, even though it's longer. I just feel like I need to go that way. And then they run into somebody from church and they give them some encouragement, just things like that. Like, they just really seem like I went this way thinking I was doing something wrong, or thinking I was doing something different. Like, God had something for me there. Even just, here I'm currently, as you can tell by the fairy lights, I'm currently at my school, my chaplaincy office at my school. And just here, like, the amount of unexpected God moments, I was walking up to an NPC to check something, and all of a sudden there's just somebody there, and you're just right there at the right time to have that conversation and encourage them, or to help them with something. And that, maybe that's maybe personality type plays into this too. Like, I'm a little bit of a chaotic creative, like I struggle with routine sometimes, just that sort of thing. So maybe I'm a little bit more prone to it and a bit more okay with it. But I know some people, they really like everything's run a tight ship, like they've got everything highly organized. So maybe this is just something that is naturally easier for me, and some people would struggle with it more. But I think there are definitely moments when God moves in the unexpected, but we also have to kind of be open and prepared for that divine appointment, to be like looking out for it in a way, which isn't always easy to do, because we've got so much on our minds and on our schedules that, sometimes we're not expecting the unexpected.
A couple of things as you were talking that sort of came to mind. We talked last week, I believe, if you want to go check out the episode, if you haven't seen it, we talked about, I guess, having different worship languages, different ways we connect with God. So you touched a little bit on personality types. Some people are just more spontaneous. They're more open to God leading them into those places. But and then I also thought of a Bible scenario, I guess. The thief on the cross. Like, what more unexpected place could Jesus be ministering to someone than, right there on the cross? Like, this guy was, in one Bible version, everyone was mocking him, the people on the cross. But later on, we see this sort of small interaction where this guy has a change of heart. He's a criminal, whatever. He's being in the same situation as Jesus, yet he recognizes Jesus there. And, we would, as Christians, maybe sometimes look down on people who don't meet up certain standards that we have, and yet sometimes they're the people that God is calling us to minister to, and we can miss that if we're not comfortable with what God is doing in places we don't expect to see God in, or we don't expect to feel, God's presence. Jesus is there, like, if we look at the different things that happened in that time while he was there on the cross, he's crying out from the Psalms, my God, why have you forsaken me? He felt like a distance from his Father. And yet he also, we see him forgiving, which is his enemies, which is where God shows up. We see him forgiving this guy on the cross and offering him hope and encouragement in that it's the most discouraging place you could be on earth, and yet he's offering hope and encouragement. So I just feel like, wow, that, that's a place we can see God working in the unexpected sort of places. To me, that's encouraging.
Yeah, or even Saul, who became Paul on the road to Damascus. Not only an unexpected occasion, but an unexpected person for God to show up with, to blind him of all things, like unexpected way, unexpected person in an unexpected place. Because you read the story and it just kind of comes out of nowhere, like you're going down the road and bang, there's a bright light. It's incredible the things God does, and he blinded him, but he blinded him so that he could see.
And I wonder how often we blind ourselves by our expectations of God. We miss opportunities to see where God's working because we expect God to work in certain ways or in certain places, or we want God to connect us with people on our terms, like in the church hour, not sort of during the week when we're busy and we've got family appointments and we've got, running from this thing to that thing. And I wonder how much we miss those divine appointments that you're talking about, because we're not open to the unexpected. We're not open to not having control of our lives. I guess it speaks to the human condition a little bit. We all want to be our own little gods. That's where idolatry comes in. We're trying to control things. Really, it's really interesting. It's just my mind is like thinking of all these different things. It's crazy.
Yeah, we love control. Like I think it should be something regardless of personality. We all seem to have this kind of longing. I don't know. I see it around that we want to control things, and it looks different according to personalities, like what we want to control or even how much we want to control. But we seem to love the idea of controlling things. I mean, you talk to so many about like teenagers today, and like, what kind of job do you want to do? And they all want to be like a YouTuber or something. And I'm like, why do you want to be a YouTuber? Like, I can like make lots of money and I can like do it on my own time and do it about like what I want to do, and it's like they want to have all this money so that they can control their financial situation. They want to have a job where the theme can be whatever they want, really. Like they can make videos about games or about makeup or whatever, and they want to do it on their own time. They want to control their time as well. I don't know if they necessarily want to do it for those reasons, but I just think about how much I see that, like that for controlling, like people, like little kids with toys. Like if they have a toy they want, they're the only one who plays with it. Like I control this toy, and I guess part of it is kind of natural, but it can very easily get unhealthy. And when that impacts our spiritual life and our prayer life, like we're kind of trying to control everything. Sure, there's a level of maybe healthy control and taking like healthy ownership over your life. Like obviously things like your health and fitness and financial situation. Yeah, sure. Like there's good stewardship, but it can get into a level where like, we want control overload and we're trying to control every little thing. And when something unexpected comes out, it can be good for us to have those unexpected moments because it can drive us to prayer, but it can also be, I'm not in control anymore, and you get frustrated and just lose track of everything.
And I feel like sacrifice is in some ways the opposite of control, because you're surrendering, you're letting go of, and we know how much of Christian. I've just written an article for Signs about sacrifice, I guess, for our November issue, and I'm just thinking about it a bit lately. And in many ways, what you're talking about there's also the flip side of us trying to control and trying to have these safe and comfortable lives. There seems to be a diminished, and I'm not saying this judgmentally because I'm talking to myself as well. There seems to be a diminished emphasis on sacrifice or, conviction, like committing to something, to go all in and be willing to give up, control, essentially. I know there's a lot of times in my life where there've been transition points, like from high school, as you say, from high school, what am I going to do with my life? finishing college? Am I going to get a job? What's going to happen with my future? And I think at those points, I've often have been some of the times in my life I pray most heartfelt, most regularly, most often, because I'm praying for God's will, and I'm praying to figure out what my future looks like. Like, I just don't know, and I hate that uncertainty. And so I'm trying to sort of exert control in some ways, but I've also seen God lead me because of those prayers. But he didn't do it, I think, for my personality. He didn't give me an answer like a sign from heaven. He didn't knock me off a donkey. He didn't wet a rug out the front of my tent, or wet the ground and leave the rug dry. I think if he had given me an answer, I could have easily blamed God and just followed the path. But if things go wrong, then I'm like, well, God put me here, so it's his fault, sort of thing. I think he knew that I needed the perseverance, the patience, the non-answer. I guess it was, in hindsight, he answered me every time, but it took longer than my schedule allowed for that he answered me. Do you know what I mean? I didn't see it in the present. I didn't see him answering. But looking back at my life, I can see at all of those points, he actually carried me. He led me through, and he gave me something, this hope and this future that I found. And I think that's, I've wrestled with this a lot in my life. I've been at those points with frustration, like praying, like, hey, God, like, show me the way. And yet it's felt like he didn't answer. But I know now, also from experience and from growing through that faith, it's like, actually, he did what was best for me at the time by not answering me at the time. But he also did answer me at the time, in that he actually led me. But it took a while. It was slow. It was hard. I had to do the work. But I do believe he was there at every step of the way. So, I guess that comes up when we talk about this. For me, these memories of, like, actually God saw me through some of those really challenging times in my life.
Yeah. And what, I guess, is something that helped you turn around and see where God moved? Because I think sometimes, like, somebody will tell me a story, and in my head I'm like, oh wow, God really moved, but they don't seem to recognize that, like, even in hindsight. Yeah. Is there something for you that helps you look back and see how God helped you through?
I feel like many of the scenarios that I'm describing is like to do with my calling, my work, my identity, I guess, in my occupation with record and with stuff like that. And I guess, I've often felt it's often been at a point of great joy and contentment and satisfaction that I go, hey, hang on. I remember, 10 months ago, being in a valley of just, difficulty.
Yeah.
I just remember not knowing and thinking, where's the hope in this situation? And I think at those times I've had to acknowledge, or maybe God's tapped me on the shoulder and been like, hey, see where we've gone? See what we've overcome, So I don't know exactly what it is necessarily, but I do look back. I'm always conscious. I think one for me is that I'm hyper aware in the lead up. So I'm praying, fasting. I'm really, like, seeking and searching. And so then for me, when things finally do work themselves out, you get that opportunity, that job, or you see yourself achieving something that you feel God's called you to do. You're like, because you were hyper aware, because you were praying. I think prayer helps you to see that, because if you haven't asked, you don't recognize it as an answer, I suppose. So for me, certainly the season of prayer leading up to some of these big events in my life, big successes or big God moments, and the feeling of joy and contentment and peace, I guess, that comes with being in God's will. A couple of those seasons that I'm talking about, God answered me by finding that old song talks about the peace that passes understanding, right?
Yeah.
And I felt a sense of peace and contentment even though I was still worried because I didn't see the end or I didn't see the outcome, there are a couple of times that God has actually just made me feel warm inside, like in the difficult or the dark times. He's actually just said, you know what, I've got your back. I'm on this journey with you. It's all going to be fine. Even if you can't see it for a while, you're not going to see it for a while, but we're good. Like, I've got you. It doesn't always happen. I don't always feel that sense. I can have extended seasons of difficulty and darkness, and I don't always feel that close to God. I'm like, God, where are you going to show up at some point? Like, I really need this right now. And I don't always see that, but I have. A couple of times I have felt that. And so in those moments, it's easy to see, all right, God's leading me. But in others, I think it's, the season of prayer and the contentment or the peace that you feel that, hey, comes with, the hard decision. God, whatever you ask me, I'm going to do it. It's hard, but I'd recommend it. I recommend, in my experience, I did a worship. I was in Fulton College in Fiji a few weeks back, and I did a worship for the young guys there. And I just told them a bit of my story, like I'm telling you here now, and basically said, the best decision I ever made was to say to God, whatever your will is, I'm going to try my best to be in it and to do that and to follow that path, because it's not about me, and to surrender in that way. I haven't always done it well, and I don't always do it perfectly. I do it in my own flawed, very, halfway sometimes. But it's just, that's the commitment. That's I guess the stepping point, and God uses us at that point from there. I've talked a lot. Tell me what that brought up for you. Tell me what you're thinking now as we're sharing.
I think sorry, I'm a pastor, so I'm gonna preach for a second. But it brings to me Psalm 23, and this is part of my I read a book a while ago, and it talks about having a daily office, so not just having a morning prayer time, but actually booking in prayer times throughout the day, depending on how your routine and all that kind of thing. Just have to be regimented. And I found myself coming back a lot to Psalm 23 and just reading it through as part of one of my prayer times through the day. I don't necessarily do it every day, but I find it helpful. And I was just thinking, at the beginning, it says, "The Lord is my shepherd; I lack nothing. He lies branches, He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul, and He guides me along the right paths for His name's sake." Then this is the key part. "Even though I walk through the darkest valley," or some translations might say the valley of shadow of death, "I will fear no evil, for you're with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me." So that idea that when we go through the valley, it's a dark valley. The point is you can't see, but God is with you, and He's going to take you through it. He's not going to take you out of it. He's not going to take you around it. It's just a normal part of our faith journey that you're going to be going through some seasons where you're not going to know what's coming up next. But that recognition that He's with you, He has been with you, and He will be with you, is so important to giving us what we need to get through it. And to celebrate the wins, to celebrate how He's brought us through, to celebrate those divine appointments, to celebrate even in the spectacles of life and the things that life can throw at us. Because when you're stumbling around in the dark, it's a dark valley. Man, I'm terrible at walking around in the dark. I hit my toe on things all the time. Whatever. It's what the heck? I should know. I should have known there'd be something here. Whatever. That's just the darkness. That's reality. We fumble around in it. We run into things. But when we look back, sometimes we can be like, oh man, God just brought me through that. And I think that's, I don't know, for me at least, there's sometimes when I'm like, I should have recognized sooner how God brought me through that. You can't beat yourself up on it, hindsight's always 2020.
That's right.
Yeah,
and I think it is.
But I kind of, I was just going to, I kind of like how you said, whenever you're on these hard seasons, you start it with prayer, and you're kind of praying and giving it to God, as best you can the whole way through, And I think that's really powerful. Just starting it with prayer, it's like you're setting a really healthy trajectory.
Well, it often starts as the fire escape prayer that we were talking about before. I don't think those are I don't think those are bad. I'm not saying they're bad. I just think we shouldn't rely on that all the time. So there might be sustained seasons of prayer because they start as emergency prayers, like, God, I'm at my wit's end, this is tough. So I don't want to, my Bible app keeps crashing, but I highlighted a verse. There was a verse a few days ago that I came across, and it was, and I highlighted it because it spoke to me since writing this. I saw this verse, but it was something about like, when you need help, pray. That's basically what it said. When you need help, pray. And I was like, well, that's a biblical injunction. That's an invitation. God's saying, hey, when you're in trouble, pray to me. And that's an appropriate response to that. So I don't want to diminish, I guess, praying those plane crash prayers, oh, we're going down, Mayday, help me,
Oh, yeah.
Those are still a part of a Christian's journey, and they should be. And I think God still responds to prayers like that. But I do think there is something in a season or a habit of prayer as well in keeping us going. If you're watching and have a comment as well on seasons that you feel it's easy or hard to pray, you want to contribute, feel free in the comments. I like what you said about, I guess, just, that Psalm. I really like Psalm 23. I know it pretty well, and so I find that I can pray. There was a while where I was kind of praying through it, as in I would use the phrase, but I'd expand on it to use that concept, the principle in each line in my life, what was happening at the time. And I found it really helpful because it goes through praise, it goes through thanksgiving, and it goes through the difficult stuff and the challenges. And so there's a real opportunity to, I guess, break it down line by line and just bring it to God and just look for his leading, look for his guiding. So I really value that Psalm. And I guess as a writer, the metaphors are really deep for me. Like, I really like the visual images, the pictures, the word pictures that the psalmist paints. And the valley of the shadow of death, I've been there. Like, do you know what I mean? I can sense, like, I get it.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's one of those things, even though, like, I've never herded sheep, I don't know about you, but, like, even though it's such a foreign profession to me, it's so real, and you can visualize it. You can imagine it. You can imagine yourself being the sheep, which is, like, so random. But you can imagine that and feel it so much through that psalm. It's really powerful. Even translated from Hebrew to English, it's still just as powerful. It's amazing.
You're a pastor, right? So I guess a lot of people may have asked you the question, like the disciples asked Jesus, teach me to pray. Like, how do I pray? I think there's a danger in making formulas around prayers or prescribing how to pray. And yet there's also a danger in not praying because we're afraid of prescribing to some kind of formula, like doing it too rote or too meaningless. So how do we find that balance between sort of maybe praying well, praying effectively, but also not praying for performance or to control God? Or do you know what I'm getting at? The different extremes that we could take into our prayer life. How can we? And I'm asking you this question at the risk of, like, here's 3 simple steps. We're opening ourselves up to that. But I guess is there a way we can make prayer easier? Because sometimes we do struggle with it.
Yeah, it's man, how long have we got left? We got like
this is when we get to the practical stuff, we give our friends online some practical ideas around prayer.
Yeah, it's huge. It's such a massive topic, and like there have been amazing like books and stuff written on this topic as well. I just don't even feel like I can scrape the surface. I would really highly recommend Timothy Keller's book on prayer. That was really cool. Just he gave me some insights that have really lived with me a long time. I've been reading it again recently, so that one's just on my mind. But I mean, that's the thing though. Prayer can and should sort of be anything in a way. Like if somebody asks me, like, if they're in a troubled situation, what do I pray? Like, you can just pray like, help, and God will get it, like,
Right.
But at the same time, like, doing something more formal, like reading through Psalm 23 is also just as valid,
Right.
and just as helpful. And I think actually sort of doing both and not being afraid to, dare I say, experiment with your prayer life a little bit is really helpful. Because I found, I don't know if you've, that YouVersion Bible app. I like to use that. And they have these daily Bible verses. And nowadays they've got like a little teaching with them and stuff that you can watch. They're like, one really cool part of it is, as you go through, it actually has a prayer written out that you could pray based on that Bible verse that you read.
Right.
Which I've really enjoyed that, because it's just been like a prayer written by somebody else on a topic I don't necessarily always think about praying about. And that's been a really helpful, like, it just gives me a little, like, just, even if the whole thing is like a little bit like, oh, it's just not quite my language, like often there'll be like one little part and I'm like, oh, that's really good. And I'll just like take it and apply it to my prayer life. For my personality type and the way I look at God and the way I think about these things, that's been really helpful. Finding pre-written prayer formulas and just taking bits and pieces and putting them together. And sometimes even praying pre-written prayers written by other people. Some even, like, sometimes they're quite old prayers that have been passed down that can be really nice to just walk through. And one thing early on in my sort of development journey with my prayer life, I remember one thing that I found really helpful was finding some of those pre-written prayers and like rewriting them or rewording them in my own language.
Right.
And I just found that, I don't do it as much nowadays, but I remember, in my earlier days of like when I first started studying theology, and I was doing it a fair bit then, because it was just helpful. It was helpful to wrap my head around it a little bit, and just wrap my head around things that, I could be praying for this. I hadn't thought about praying about that before, or giving my heart to God in this way. Because I think it can be really easy. We do the whole like, what's the acronym? For praying? Yeah. You.
Or one of the others, SALT or something. There's a few different ones.
Yeah, there are. Anyway, it's the idea of like, if first you start by like praising God, then you thank God for things, then you ask Him for things, and then do your confession. Repent of your sins. Whatever the acronyms are, if anybody knows it, feel free to put it in the chat. There are a few of them. They can be really helpful too, but sometimes we get stuck in a little bit of a rut with those.
Right.
And I found, like, for me, I definitely got stuck in a prayer rut with those, with one of those formulas. And I still sort of follow it today in a way, but I've also got more ways of praying that have been really helpful to take on board. What about you?
Yeah, look, just when you were speaking, it came to mind that the struggles that we as Protestants have with some of that sometimes. We are suspicious of, we don't have the liturgy or the prayer book or the written out by other people. And I think we miss an opportunity to pray the Bible, to pray Bible verses and promises and things. That wasn't a big part of my upbringing necessarily, but it's something I've found helpful in recent years, is to take verses and incorporate them into my prayer, whatever way that looks like, praying around that verse. The other thing, I guess, is prayer journaling or prayer, notes and stuff. You asked me before how I know that I've looked back and seen God's leading, and not everyone sees it and stuff. And it's very easy to forget. I think there's a real instruction in the Torah to remember, remember where God has led you. Remember coming out of Egypt. Remember. And I I have had moments where I've looked through, because sometimes I do it in the notes of my phone on the Notes app. If I'm really struggling and need some catharsis, I need to put out how I'm feeling because it's not great. I might just write how I'm feeling. I'm just like, hey, God, well, don't even necessarily address it to God. I'm just like, today was a rubbish day. Like, here's the reason. Here's how I'm feeling. And then I find that note, because I scroll through looking for other things at times, and I open it and I go, and then I praise God, like, wow, that's cool. So I think the discipline of prayer journaling or writing your diary to God, different people have a gratefulness journal, or they do different things. There's different ways to do it, but it's often when you're flicking back through those things that you realize, hey, God's actually taken me a pretty long way from when I was in that place in my past. So that's one thing that I've found helpful as well, is sort of prayer journaling, or the discipline of praying, or getting out my thoughts in a written format, getting them out in a different way than just doing it in my head or speaking it out loud in a group of people, or in bed when I'm trying to go to sleep, thanking God for the day, to actually be intentional and journal it out, I think is sometimes been helpful for me. So what's the bottom line? I guess there's no right or wrong way to pray, but we should be doing it. Pray without ceasing, Paul says. So
yeah, absolutely. I think, just wrapping up sort of my thoughts, I guess, like having this regular deep prayer life is awesome, and it'll give you strength. But those like Lord help prayers, or the fire escape prayers, or plane crash, whatever you're calling them prayers, like I think they add just as much. But I think the reason I know to go to those prayers even is because of that deep-rooted prayer life I've already built up, that I know that in the midst of chaos, God is there too. In the midst of my valley of shadow and death, God is there too.
Hey, that'd be a great place to wind up, Josh, but we've got a really good question that's just come in. So I think we'll just have a quick look at it. We often ask others to join praying in significant need. This is like forcing God to act. Does it mean, we're forcing God to act? We think if we get, I've heard some people use it to gossip. Do you have any prayer requests? But does God have a quota of prayers before he can act? Why have so many praying? I think that's a really good, I think there's just something in Christian community, Scott, that, is a helpful encouragement. What do you think about that, Josh? Should we get the whole world in on our prayer requests, or should we do it more privately?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't know if God has like a quota of prayers that he's got to fill, and then he's like, oh, yep, we've had 50 pray for this. Or like if it's the, we've got the AFL grand finals this weekend, are there going to be more Geelong supporters praying for a victory, or are there more Swan supporters praying for the victory? I don't know.
Let's hope it's the Swannies. Geelong's had too many in the last few years, I'd say.
We could hope that, or we could hope for Geelong, because that's my team.
I think this is where we part ways. I have to go for my wife's team, Josh. I'm sorry. My wife plays for Sydney, so
that's fair. My family is Geelong supporters all the way, but that's okay. You can love
agree to disagree.
Right? Yeah,
but we're still friends.
But you see what I mean? It's like, yeah, absolutely. But I think this is a reality that prayer is such a mystery, and why God acts certain ways. I mean, it's as mysterious as it is to pray. The answers to prayer are even more mysterious in a way, and that's kind of, for me, the act of praying is partly to bring my request to God, but also partly to bring myself to, regardless of whatever happens, like I'm bringing myself to your will, God.
I really like that. I really like that, and it could reflect on group prayers as well, because we're all, as a community, bringing ourselves to God to be ready to take His will, whatever happens in this scenario. Yeah, hey, we've got to go.
Unify around that. That's really powerful. But yes, you're right. We do have to go. Yeah.
We've run out of time, but we'll maybe that's a whole nother topic for another day. We can certainly revisit. But yeah, hey, I really appreciate you joining us today, Josh, and everyone who's watched and is watching and will watch in the future. It's great to have you guys as well. Thanks for joining us. We love you. We can't wait to see you next week, and we'll hopefully have another great topic to discuss then. But until then, Josh, God bless your ministry and your family and everything that you're doing. And yeah, we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, and you too. Thank you for all you do and for your amazing writings. They are such a blessing to me, and I know to so many others. So thank you for the conversation, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Be blessed.
Thanks, guys.